77 years on this earth, and I've lived with this pain for more than half a century. Every morning when I wake, I wonder where my son is, whether he's still alive, and if he'll ever come home. Deep down, I never imagined that the answer to this heartbreak had always been closer than I thought. My dear grandchildren, my life is like a book yellowed with age, the early pages sweet, the middle ones soaked in tears, and the final pages. The final pages are what I want to share with you today. I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much. I'm Elizabeth Benedict, 77 years of age now. My tale stretches back to 1973 when I was merely 25, residing in a tiny Kentucky farming community. Those were different days. Women wed early and birthed numerous children. My journey followed this pattern. At 19, I became Miss Richard Bennett, wife to a dedicated, solemn man with whom I had 3 little ones. Daniel, my firstborn, was my greatest delight. He was an exceptionally bright child who absorbed knowledge with a remarkable ease. He was just 6 when he vanished. Every single moment of that fateful day remains etched in my memory as though it happened only yesterday. Rural existence back then was uncomplicated. Our humble home featured a spacious yard where I tended chickens, and our kitchen contained a wood stove for cooking and warmth. Richard toiled in the fields, cultivating corn and tobacco, while I managed our household and children. Daniel was my faithful helper. That boy possessed boundless vitality. He adored racing through fields, scaling trees, and creating new games. But nothing pleased him more than assisting his father with farm chores. From his earliest days, he expressed impatience to grow up and become as strong as his daddy. The day of his disappearance started normally. I woke up early, made coffee, and prepared lunch. Daniel ran out to play with his friends after having breakfast, saying he'd be back before noon. It was a common routine. There was no reason to worry. The sun was strong and the dirt roads kicked up dust when the wind blew. The town was small, and all of Mr. Strike let their children play in the street without fear. There wasn't this thing about keeping an eye on them all the time. Children were free. When the clock struck noon, I began to worry. Daniel was never late for lunch, especially knowing his father didn't like to wait. Time passed and the food grew cold. I went out to ask the neighbors if anyone had seen the boy, but nobody knew anything. He was playing with the kids down by the creek, said Mrs. Davenport, a neighbor who always sat on her porch observing everything. My heart froze. The creek wasn't deep, but it was treacherous when it rained heavily. The current would carry away anything in its path. I ran out calling his name, my heart tight with fear. When I reached the creek, I saw some children playing barefoot in the mud. "Daniel!" I cried desperately. The boy stopped and looked at me startled. "He already left, Mrs. Bennett. He went home a while ago." That made no sense. If he had gone home, why wasn't he there? My chest began to ache with desperation. I ran back to the house, calling for him, turning over corners, opening doors and cupboards as if he were playing hide and seek. But he wasn't there. I called Richard, who came hurriedly, and together we began to search the surroundings. We asked all the neighbors, friends, relatives. Daniel had simply vanished in the middle of the day as if he had never existed. The hours transformed into an endless nightmare. The sun set, and our son was still missing. The anguish was unbearable. Richard tried to maintain his calm, but I could see the fear in his face. When night fell, we did something we never imagined we would need to do. We went to the sheriff's office. In those days, law enforcement didn't have the resources they do today. There were no security cameras, no social media to spread news. The local sheriff looked at us with disdain. "Kids go missing all the time. He's probably sleeping at a friend's house," he said, as if it were a minor problem. But Daniel wasn't like that. He would never sleep away from home without letting us know. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room looking at the door, hoping that at any moment he would come running back and say it was all a misunderstanding. But time passed, and the worst began to settle inside me. What if he never came back? The next day dawned with even greater distress. The entire town was already talking about the disappearance. Some people said he might have gotten lost. Others whispered things I didn't even want to hear. The worst part was that there were no clues, no footprints, no clothing, no trace of where he might have gone. How does a child just disappear into thin air? In the days that followed, we organized groups to search the woods, creeks, and roads. My husband didn't say a word. He just left every morning and returned every night, his eyes hollow and tired. But something about him bothered me. He seemed more closed off than usual, and that's how the worst phase of my life began. Daniel never came back home. The searches continued for weeks, months, years, but he was never found, and as unbearable as the pain was, what I still didn't know was that the worst was yet to come. Time has a cruel way of teaching us to live with pain. In the beginning, it swallows us whole, suffocates us, makes us believe we can never breathe again without feeling our chest tighten. But as days, weeks, and months pass, it settles into some dark corner within us. It doesn't disappear. It just learns to hide. In the first days after Daniel's disappearance, my mind refused to accept that he could be far away. Something inside me screamed that he was still nearby, that he might be hiding somewhere, waiting for me to find him. The searches began with our neighbors who volunteered to help. Simple men, farm workers accustomed to facing cold nights and scorching days. They carried flashlights and machetes to clear paths through the brush, and in their eyes was the determination of people who wouldn't accept losing one of their own. We traveled the trails leading out of town, every hole in the road, every dense thicket. We called his name until we lost our voices. We looked under bridges, among the rocks in the creek, behind old abandoned sheds, but there was no sign of him anywhere. With each unsuccessful search, my desperation grew. What could have happened? Children don't just disappear without leaving traces. Had he run away? But why? Had he been taken, but by whom? Days turned into weeks, and then the rumors started. In a small town, gossip travels faster than the wind. At first, everyone seemed concerned, trying to help us, but soon the whispers began. I heard he ran away because he was beaten at home. What if it was a crime? There are so many strange people around. What if he fell in the creek and the current carried his body away? Each word was a blow. I wanted to scream, wanted people to stop making up stories, but I myself no longer knew what to believe. The police were pressured by some residents to intensify the search, but in the 1970s, with limited resources, without precise records, without an efficient system, What could they do? Nothing. They just filed a report and told us to wait. But how can a mother wait? My body refused to accept the lack of answers. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, no longer had the strength to keep the house in order. I spent my days sitting on the porch, looking at the road, waiting for him to return at any moment. Richard reacted differently. While I was consumed by grief, he became a man of stone. He left every morning and returned every night without saying a word about the searches. At first I thought he was trying to be strong for me, but something about him bothered me. There was something wrong. He didn't seem to be searching for Danielle. One day I noticed his clothes were covered in dirt, as if he had been digging something or moving earth somewhere. Fear gripped me. My heart pounded in my chest. "Where have you been going every night, Richard?" He took a long time to respond, looking me in the eyes for a few seconds that seemed too long. "Looking for our son," he said dryly, without emotion. But why did I feel it was a lie? Time continued to pass. 1 month became 2, then 3, then half a year. The searches diminished. The neighbors returned to their routines. The police forgot. The sheriff stopped taking our calls. All that remained were Richard and I, with his silences, his dirty shirts, and his eyes that showed nothing. But the worst was yet to come. I just didn't know it yet. The first months were like living inside a nightmare from which I could never wake up. Every day, I opened my eyes, hoping to hear Danielle's small footsteps running through the yard, the sound of his laughter echoing through the house. But the silence was a cruel reminder that he was no longer there. At first, the entire town seemed concerned. The neighbors would come to my house offering food. The men still talked about new searches. But with time, the case was forgotten. People returned to living their lives because that's what time did. It made people forget, move on. But I couldn't manage it. Each morning that dawned without my son was like a knife piercing my chest. I would stand at the door of our house, looking at the dirt road that led to K-Town, hoping to see him returning. Maybe he had just gotten lost. Maybe someone had found him and was bringing him back. But no one came. The days turned into months. The initial desperation began to transform into an endless void. It was as if my soul had been ripped out, leaving only a hole inside me. I did things out of obligation, cooked without hunger, cleaned the house without purpose, went to the Baptist church without faith. Daniel's face began to fade from my dreams. At first, I dreamed of him every night, but with time he disappeared even from my dreams, and along with him, I began to lose pieces of myself. Richard changed. Not that he was a very talkative or affectionate man before, but after Daniel's disappearance, he became different. He didn't want to talk about our son. Whenever I tried, he cut the subject short. "We need to move on, Elizabeth," he would say. But how does a mother move on without her own child? At first, I thought it was his way of dealing with the pain. Everyone suffers in their own way, right? Maybe he was closing himself off to avoid showing weakness. But as the months passed, I realized it wasn't just pain. He avoided going out with me, stopped attending the search meetings, and when neighbors asked if there was any news, he would just shake his head and change the subject. It was as if Daniel had never existed, and that was killing me inside. I became obsessed. If the police wouldn't help, I would search myself. I would go around the town asking each resident, each shopkeeper, each traveler who passed through. Have you seen a 6-year-old boy, brown eyes, straight-eyed hair? Most would just shake their heads, but others would look at me with their pity, and I began to feel that people no longer wanted to hear my story. To them, I was just the mother who couldn't accept reality. Loneliness consumed me. The lack of answers drove me mad. And worst of all, guilt began to grow inside me. What if Daniel had called for me and I hadn't heard? What if he had gotten lost and I hadn't searched quickly enough to find him? What if I had kept an eye on him that day? Part of me thought I should have done something different, that it was my fault. I no longer had any desire to go out, to see anyone. I just wanted to stay inside the house, surrounded by memories of my son. But Richard couldn't stand it. You need to stop, Elizabeth. It's been a year without my son. You talk as if it were easy to forget, I shouted. He didn't respond, just looked at me with that gaze I could no longer decipher. And for an instant, I felt a chill. It was as if he knew something I didn't know. One day, while cleaning the house, I found something strange inside Richard's wardrobe. A bag. I opened it without knowing what to expect. Inside were the clothes Daniel was wearing the day he disappeared. My hands began to tremble. What was that doing there? Why had Richard hidden our son's clothes? The light blue shirt, the worn shorts, the leather sandals, all bare and dirty with soil. I froze. My fingers passed over the fabric, and a chill ran down my spine. The soil. Why was it there? Why hadn't he told me? The house was silent when I heard his footsteps arriving. I quickly hid the bag and tried to act normally, but something inside me said the truth about Daniel was closer than I had imagined. I just needed to have the courage to discover it. The bag remained hidden under my mattress for days. I couldn't look at it without feeling my heart race, without feeling despair consuming me. That bag was proof that something was wrong, but at the same time, I didn't have the courage to confront Richard. I wanted to believe he wasn't guilty. My wife's heart refused to accept that the man I had married, with whom I had shared my life, could be hiding something so cruel. But why had he hidden our son's clothes? And that soil? What did it mean? After discovering the clothes, I no longer slept. I would lie beside Richard, feeling the weight of his breathing, hearing the small noises of the house at night, and my mind wouldn't stop. I wanted to ask, wanted to extract the truth from him, but what if I wasn't prepared to hear it? In the days that followed, I began to observe everything he did, his schedules, his paths, and it was then that I began to notice strange things. He would leave every night, always at the same time, never saying where he was going. When he returned, his boots were dirty with soil, and he no longer looked me in the eyes. Something was wrong. I needed 3 weeks to gather my courage. One night while he was eating dinner, I asked the question that had been burning inside me. Where have you been going every night, Richard? He stopped with the spoon in the air. I saw his body stiffen, the way he took a deep breath before answering. Working, he said without looking at me. Working where? I insisted without blinking. In the field, at night. The silence between us was deafening. He put his spoon down on the table with force and looked at me for the first time in a long time. Elizabeth, why can't you simply accept it? Daniel is gone. It's over. My eyes filled with tears. Over for you, because for me, It's not over." He sighed, passing his hand over his face as if he were exhausted from that conversation. "You need to move on, woman." "But how do I move on when my own husband hides our son's clothes under the bed?" That night, I waited for him to fall asleep and went to the wardrobe. I took the bag with the clothes and looked again. The soil, the smell of the soil was still there. I knew at that moment that I needed to do something. I needed to discover the truth with my own eyes. I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much. The following night, when Richard left, I waited 5 minutes and went after him. Fear made my heart beat so hard that I thought he might hear me. The town was dark, illuminated only by the moon. The cold wind cut my face, and the only thing I could hear were my own footsteps on the dirt road. I followed him for almost half an hour, and it was then that I saw where he was going. Richard wasn't going to the field. He was going to the wood. My body was paralyzed. Why was he going to the woods? What was he doing there? I waited for him to disappear into the thicket before finding the courage to follow the same path. The trail was narrow, full of dry leaves that crackled under my feet. Each sound made me hold my breath. If he saw me there, I didn't know what might happen. After a few minutes of walking, I saw lights among the trees, and then the shock. There was a hole dug in the ground. The earth was disturbed. The sides were recent, as if someone had been working there recently. And beside the hole, I saw something that made my legs weaken. A shovel. The same shovel my husband used on the farm. I later realized he was digging this hole to hide evidence of what he had done, perhaps burying Daniel's remaining belongings, or creating a false grave to convince me our son was dead if I ever became too suspicious. I couldn't move. What was he doing there? Why was there a hole? What was buried there? My breathing became uncontrolled. I tried to take a step back, but stepped on a dry branch. The sound echoed in the forest. Richard turned his face immediately, and then our gazes met. For a second, the world stopped. I saw the surprise on his face, the fear, the anger, and then he dropped the shovel and came in my direction. "Elizabeth, what are you doing here?" My mouth was dry. I could barely breathe, but at that moment I knew. I knew my husband was hiding something about Daniel, and I would not leave there without discovering the truth. My body trembled as Richard approached. His gaze carried something I had never seen before, a mixture of anger and desperation. The forest was dark, the wind made the leaves whisper around us, and the only light was from the moon filtering through the branches. The dug hole before us seemed like a portal to the worst of nightmares. "What are you doing here, Elizabeth?" Richard repeated, his voice grave and threatening. I tried to swallow, but my throat was locked. "What are you doing here, Richard? What is this hole?" He hesitated for a brief moment, seemed lost, but then took a deep breath, and his expression hardened. "It's nothing," he responded coldly, averting his eyes. But it was everything. In that instant, I was certain that hole hid the truth about Daniel. The idea that my son could be there, under that disturbed earth, made me lose strength. My vision, my body, went cold. But before I could faint, Richard grabbed my arm. "Let's go home. You shouldn't be here." His hand squeezed my skin with force. He wanted to drag me away from there, but I refused to move. "Tell me now, "Richard, what did you do?" He clenched his jaw. His eyes grew somber. "Nothing. Let's go." My mind screamed for me to run, to flee from him. But at the same time, something inside me said I couldn't stop now. I freed my arm from his hand and took a step back. "I'm not leaving here without knowing the truth." He clenched his fist. "Elizabeth," I faced him, holding back tears. "You owe me this truth, Richard, for our son." The silence between us was suffocating, and then, for the first time in months, I saw fear in his eyes. He knew, and at that moment, I understood that the truth was much closer than I had imagined. That night, we returned home without saying a word, but I didn't sleep. I spent hours sitting on the bed, hugging my knees, trying to understand what I had just seen. Richard was hiding something. The hole, the disturbed earth, the way he reacted when he saw me there. But if Daniel were there, Richard wouldn't have let me leave alive. This idea tormented me all night long. What was my husband hiding? I needed answers, but they came from a place I never expected. The next morning, while I was washing dishes, with my mind still clouded with thoughts, someone knocked on the door. I opened it slowly and found myself facing a mailman holding a yellowed envelope. "Letter for Mrs. Bennett." My fingers trembled as I held the paper. "Who sent it?" He shrugged. "It arrived without a return address." My heart raced. I took the letter inside, sat at the table, and opened it with trembling hands. Inside the envelope was a single sheet, carefully folded. The smell of the paper was old, as if it had been kept for years, and then my eyes began to scan the words written in haste. "Elizabeth, I know you never stopped looking for your son. I know the questions are killing you inside. I can't say much, but I need you to know that Daniel was never far away. He was always closer than you imagined. Ask the man who sleeps beside you every night. The truth is with him." My blood froze. My entire body was paralyzed. What did this mean? The letter didn't say who wrote it, didn't give more details, but those words told me everything I needed to know. The truth was inside my house, and I wouldn't stop until I discovered it. The letter trembled in my hands. The words danced before my eyes, but I had already understood what they meant to say. Daniel was never far away. The truth was inside my house. My legs lost their strength, and I needed to sit down before I fell to the floor. For years, I had searched for answers outside, in the streets, in the town, in the fields, at sheriff's offices, but now the truth was telling me it had always been close. "Richard." The letter didn't say it in so many words, but I knew. Deep down, I always knew. But what exactly did that mean? What did Richard know about Daniel's disappearance? The pain in my chest was suffocating. My mind spun among memories. His silence, the excuses, the dirty clothes hidden, the hole in the woods. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I couldn't break down. Not now. I needed to act, and for the first time in years, I made a decision. I was going to leave that house. I was going to search for answers wherever they might be, and if Richard wouldn't tell me the truth, I would find it myself. I spent the entire afternoon sitting in the kitchen chair, holding the letter, looking at the door as if at any moment Daniel might enter. But he didn't enter, and Richard, as always, came home late. That day, when he crossed the threshold, I didn't look at him as before. This time I saw a stranger. I saw a man who was hiding something from me, and I knew I could no longer live there surrounded by questions without answers. I went to the bedroom and began to pack a small suitcase. I didn't take much, just some clothes, money hidden inside the mattress, and the letter carefully folded in the pocket of my skirt. I didn't know exactly where I would go, but deep down I felt that the answer was waiting for me somewhere, and I wouldn't return home without it. I needed to think. I needed a plan. And then I remembered something. There was a man in the neighboring county known for helping families find missing relatives. His name was Mr. Stanley Wilson, a former sheriff who worked as a private investigator. I didn't have many options. If anyone could help me, it was him. The next day before the sun rose, I left the house. I didn't leave a note. I didn't explain where I was going. I simply went. I took a Greyhound bus to the neighboring county, holding my bag in my lap, feeling my heart beating so strongly that it seemed it would explode. Each mile the bus advanced was like I was leaving one nightmare and entering another. My fear was that at the end of this search, I would find something I wasn't ready to know. But it was too late to turn back. I arrived in the neighboring county in the morning. The streets were busier than those in my town, but I didn't have time to observe anything. I went straight to Mr. Stanley's address. He lived in a simple house with a small office in the back. When I knocked on the door, he took a few minutes to open it. He was an older man with an unshaven beard and a tired look. Yes? I swallowed hard. My hands were sweaty. They told me you help people find missing persons. He looked me up and down, studying my face, and then opened the door. Come in. The office was small, with a wooden desk full of papers and a strong smell of tobacco. He pointed to a chair, and I sat down. Who are you looking for? I took the letter from my pocket and placed it on the table. My son. He took the paper and read it carefully. When he finished, he looked at me differently. Where did this letter come from? They left it at my house. I don't know who sent it. He sighed and scratched his beard. This isn't common. If someone risked warning you, it's because there's something big behind this. My heart froze. What do you mean? He opened a drawer and pulled out an old notebook, flipping through the pages until he found something. Then he turned the notebook to me. My eyes fell on a name, Daniel Bennett. I almost fell off the chair. This is my son's name. Mr. Stanley nodded slowly. Years ago, a boy with this name was registered as missing, but some people reported that he might be alive and living with another family. I've been collecting information on unsolved cases for decades, and this one always troubled me, but without solid evidence, I couldn't take action. My breathing faltered. What? I don't know where he is, Mrs. Benedict, but I know where to start looking. I was trembling so much that I could barely think. Daniel was alive. My heart wanted to believe it, but my mind said it was impossible. Mr. Stanley must have seen the disbelief in my eyes. Mrs. Bennett, I've been investigating missing children cases for over 30 years. Your son's case always stood out because there were whispers about local trafficking, children being sold to families who couldn't have their own. The authorities at the time didn't take it seriously, but I kept notes on everything. Your husband's behavior after the disappearance matched the pattern I'd seen in other cases where a family member was involved. Where was he last seen? My voice came out almost in a whisper. Mr. Stanley took a deep breath. A boy named Daniel with a similar age was taken from a small town in the 70s. I felt my head spin. Taken? He nodded. Sold. My blood froze. My son was stolen from me. My body refused to accept that possibility. This doesn't make sense. He closed the notebook. If you really want to discover the truth, you need to be prepared. Sometimes finding someone means discovering things we can never forget. I needed to know one more thing. Why didn't you investigate this further when it happened? I asked, my voice trembling with both hope and accusation. Mr. Stanley's face fell. I tried, Mrs. Bennet, but in those days, without evidence, without witnesses willing to speak up, the system wouldn't act. Your husband was respected in the community, and no one wanted to believe he could do something so terrible. I've carried that failure with me all these years. That's why I keep these records, hoping someday I could help bring closure to families like yours. I close my hands with force. I've waited too long. I'm ready for anything. Tell me where I should go. He looked at me for an instant and then said the name of the town. And at that moment, I knew I was closer to the truth than ever before. The name of the town echoed in my head like a premonition. My heart was racing, my hands were sweating, and for the first time in years, I felt I was on the right track. After so much time, I was close to the truth about Daniel. Mr. Stanley wrote an address on a yellowed piece of paper and slid it to me across the table. It's in this town that the boy was last seen many years ago. I don't know if he's still there, but it's a start. I looked at that piece of paper with a lump in my throat. That simple note carried all the hope I had already lost. Thank you, Mr. Stanley. He sighed, crossing his arms on the table. Mrs. Bennet, before you go, I need to ask you something. I raised my eyes. What? Are you prepared for what you might find? The question caught me by surprise. What do you mean? Sometimes those who disappear don't want to be found. My mouth went dry. The idea of finding Daniel and him, not wanting to return to me, that would destroy me. But it was a risk I had to take. I just want the truth, I responded with a firm voice. He nodded slowly. Then go, but go with a strong heart. And with that, he shook my hand, took his pipe, and walked away to the porch, leaving me there alone with my decision. I knew there was no turning back. I took my bag, stored the paper with the address, and left. Daniel was alive, and I was going to find him. I took a bus to the town indicated by Mr. Stanley. The journey took more than 4 hours, but to me, it was an eternity. The whole time, my mind revolved around the possibilities. What if he were really alive? What if he had been taken against his will? What if he didn't want to see me? The bus traveled the dirt roads, stirring up dust in the air while my head filled with unanswered questions. I looked out the window, watching the world pass by outside, the world that continued turning while I waited for him. Daniel would now be 58 years old, a man, but would he remember me? Would he know that I never stopped looking for him? I closed my eyes and pressed the letter against my chest. I had no choice. I needed to know. When I got off the bus, I felt a chill run down my spine. The town was simple, smaller than mine, with few cobblestone streets and houses with wooden porches. I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much. The smell of freshly brewed coffee came from a nearby bakery, and people walked slowly as if time there were different. But I wasn't there to observe the landscape. I looked at the paper in my hands. The address indicated a small house at the end of the main street. My heart was beating so hard that I could feel it in my fingertips. The truth was a few meters from me, and I didn't know if I was ready. The house was simple, with a wooden fence, a bit worn by time, and a small garden in front. I stopped on the other side of the street, not knowing what to do. What if I were wrong? But before I could retreat, the door of the house opened, and then I saw him, a tall, thin young man with straight brown hair, light brown eyes, the same look that Daniel had when he was a boy. The world seemed to stop. My legs weakened. I wanted to shout his name, run to him, hug him, but I couldn't, because the moment our eyes met, he didn't recognize me. My heart shattered right there. He looked at me for a few seconds, frowning, and then went back into the house and closed the door. My chest burned. No, it couldn't be like this. I forced myself to breathe deeply and cross the street. My steps were heavy, as if the ground were trying to pull me back. I climbed the porch steps and knocked on the door with a trembling hand. I waited. The seconds dragged on like centuries. Then the door opened again, and there he was, Daniel, my son. He looked at me up close this time, his eyes studying my face as if trying to pull a lost memory. I opened my mouth, trying to speak, but my voice failed. Then he broke the silence. "Do I know you, ma'am?" My chest tightened. Tears began to roll down my face. "Daniel." He blinked, confused. "My name is Matthew." I felt a lump in my throat. "Matthew? No, your name is Daniel. You are my son." The shock in his eyes was instantaneous. He took a step back. "What?" The door opened wider, and behind him appeared an older woman, Mrs. Harrison. She looked at me with a mixture of surprise and dread, and then her expression closed. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hard. My breathing was shallow. I looked at Daniel, or Matthew, and then at that woman, the woman who raised my son. The air left my lungs. I am his mother." The silence was like thunder. Daniel, or Matthew, frowned, looking at the woman. "Mother?" The woman grabbed his arm. "Don't listen to this woman, Matthew. Let's go inside." My heart raced. "No, wait!" But she pulled him inside and slammed the door in my face, and that's how the truth hit me like a punch to the stomach. My son didn't know who I was, and worse, someone made sure to hide it from him. The door slammed in my face. The dry sound echoed inside me as if it had split my chest in two. My son was there, just a few steps away from me, and I couldn't reach him. I stood there breathless, strengthless. The words were still stuck in my throat, and my mind tried to process what had just happened. Daniel? Matthew? My son. He didn't recognize me. He didn't know who I was. And that woman made sure to keep him away from me. My eyes burned with hot tears, but I couldn't give up now. My entire life had been marked by waiting, by pain, by silences that no one wanted to fill. But I wouldn't endure another one. If someone stole my son from me, then that person owed me the truth, and I wouldn't leave there without it. I knocked on the door again, harder this time. Nothing. My heart was racing. My body was trembling. I knocked again. "Open this door. I know my son is in there." This time, I heard footsteps on the other side. The door opened with a snap, The woman was there, her eyes cold. There was no guilt, no remorse, only hostility. Go away. I refused to back down. What did you do to my son? My voice came out firmer than I expected. She took a deep breath, pressing her fingers on the side of the door, as if to hold back her anger. He is my son. I felt my stomach turn. You stole him from me. Her gaze narrowed. I saved him. My blood froze. What are you talking about? She crossed her arms and looked me up and down as if evaluating me. Do you want to know the truth? I deserve to know the truth. She took a deep breath and looked over her shoulder as if making sure that Daniel or Matthew wasn't listening. And then she said something that made my entire world crumble. It was your husband who sold him. The ground disappeared beneath my feet. What? I managed to say. She continued staring at me without blinking. Your husband, the man you slept beside every night. It was he who handed over your son. I felt my body weaken. My breathing became short. My heart raced. No. It can't be true. But it was. Deep down, I knew the moment I heard those words. The silence of Richard, the hidden clothes, the hole in the woods. He knew. He always knew. My son hadn't disappeared. He had been sold and his own father had done it. My head was spinning and my legs were weak, but I didn't move. I needed to hear it all. The woman crossed her arms and took a deep breath. He came to me when he was still a child. My husband and I wanted a child, but couldn't have one. And a man appeared, offering a boy. My voice failed. Who? She hesitated and then said his name. Richard. I felt my throat close. You're lying. She gave a humorless laugh. I wish it were a lie, but it's the truth. My knees weakened. I couldn't believe it, and at the same time, I knew it was true. Richard's behavior had always been suspicious. He never searched for Daniel as I did. He avoided talking about it. He never cried for our son because he knew where Daniel was the whole time. He had traded his own son for money. My mind screamed. My soul burned. And then I did the only thing I could do. I turned my back and ran. Ran to the bus station. Ran to catch the first bus back. Ran back home. Ran to confront the monster with whom I had slept for so many years. I arrived home at nightfall. My vision was blurred, my breathing was heavy, but nothing in the world would stop me now. I knew the truth, and he owed me an explanation. I entered the house with my chest in flames. Richard was sitting at the table, calmly eating as if nothing had happened, as if he weren't a monster. He raised his eyes and saw me, his face contorted into an expression of surprise. He knew I had discovered everything, but he still tried to pretend. Where have you been? My eyes burned. I threw my bag on the floor. You sold our son. The silence was absolute. He didn't deny it, didn't feign confusion. He just stared at the table for a second, took a deep breath, and looked back at me. I did what was necessary. A cry of pain escaped from my chest. Necessary? My hands were trembling and my head was spinning. The man with whom I had shared my life had destroyed our family and didn't even have the slightest remorse. I trusted you. My voice was a whisper. He shrugged. What did you want me to do? We had nothing, Elizabeth. You traded our son for money, Richard. He clenched his jaw. He was going to have a better life, a big house, food, everything I couldn't give him. My entire body was shaking. You had no right. Yes, I did. He slammed his hand on the table. I was his father. I swallowed my tears, feeling my heart crumbling inside my chest. You were never a father. The silence between us was cutting. Richard looked at me and then averted his eyes. Perhaps for the first time he felt shame, but it was too late. I would never forgive him, never. And Daniel would never return to being my son. The final decision. The house was silent, the most deafening silence of my life. Richard was sitting, not saying anything more, just looking at me with that cold, empty expression, as if all this were just another ordinary argument. But it wasn't. It was the end. I felt it when my body gave in, when my legs grew weak, when the weight of that truth fell on me like a collapsing building. For years I had cried over Daniel's absence. I had spent nights awake, walking through the house, waiting for any news, any clue. I had aged with this pain inside my chest, and now, after everything, the answer had always been before me. It was the man who shared my bed, who destroyed my life. I had nothing more to say. I couldn't change the past, but I could decide what to do with my future. And at that moment, I knew. I'm leaving, Richard. He slowly raised his eyes. What? I swallowed hard, wiping the tears from my face. You heard me. I cannot share this roof with a man like you. His face turned red. And where will you go, Elizabeth? My voice came out firm. Anywhere away from you. He clenched his fists on the table. You have no one. You have nowhere to go. I let out a laugh without humor. And yet, I prefer to be alone than spend another day by your side. Silence fell between us. I saw in his eyes that for the first time he was afraid because he knew he no longer controlled me. I had spent my life being a submissive woman, waiting, accepting, forgiving. But now, I was free. I picked up my bag from the floor and began to walk around the room, gathering what still mattered to me. There wasn't much. Time and sadness had taught me not to get attached to objects. But before leaving, I made sure to take one thing, an old photograph, the only one that remained of Daniel when he was small. I put it in the pocket of my skirt and took a deep breath. Then I turned to Richard for the last time. May God have mercy on you, and without looking back, I left that house. The cold night wind hit my face as soon as I closed the door behind me. My soul ached, but my feet didn't hesitate. I had one last destination before departing forever. The return to Daniel. I took the first bus back to the town where Daniel lived. The journey was silent. I looked out the window and tried to organize my thoughts, but it was impossible. Would he ever know the truth? Would he, even without remembering me, feel that something inside him was missing? The town was empty when I arrived. Few lights on the streets, the sound of the wind whistling between the houses. But I knew where to go. I walked to the house where he lived, and there, before the door, with heavy breathing and a broken heart, I knocked one last time. Mrs. Harrison opened the door. Her gaze hardened as soon as she saw me. "I asked you to go away." My voice came out firm. "I didn't come to cause problems. I just want to give this to him." I took from my pocket the photograph of Daniel as a child and held it out to her. She looked at the paper without saying anything. Then, before she could expel me again, I took a deep breath. "I know you raised him. I know you love him. But one day, he'll want to know where he came from. And when that day comes, don't hide it from him." She didn't respond, just took the photo from my hand. I stared at the open door for a few more seconds, waiting for some reaction, some word of consolation, anything. But there was nothing. And then the door closed in my face for the last time. I walked aimlessly through the town, not really knowing where to go. My heart was heavy, but for the first time there were no more doubts. The truth had freed me. Even if it was a cruel, painful truth, I would never have my son back, but at least I knew where he was and knew he was alive. For the first time in years, I felt that I could start over. I hugged my own arms and closed my eyes for an instant. Then, without looking back, I went to the bus station and took a bus to any town where I could begin again. I didn't know where destiny would take me, but for the first time I knew I deserved to be happy. A new beginning. The bus rocked on the dirt road, and the lights of the town were left behind. I was departing. There were no tears in my eyes this time, just an emptiness, a space inside me that would never be filled. For years I had waited, searched, suffered, but now the search was over. My son was alive, but was no longer mine. And Richard had destroyed everything that once existed between us. Now it was just me and a future I hadn't planned, but that for the first time I could choose. The bus traveled for hours until it stopped in a town I had never heard of before. I got off with my small suitcase, looking around, smelling the fresh coffee coming from somewhere nearby. There, nobody knew me. Nobody knew about the woman who had spent decades waiting for a son who never returned. Nobody knew about the pain I carried in my chest, and for the first time that seemed liberating. I walked through the streets slowly, absorbing every detail. The houses were simple but cozy. Some people looked curiously at me, but no one asked anything. It was a peaceful place, and perhaps it was exactly what I needed. In the first days, I just walked aimlessly, trying to understand what to do with my life. I was no longer a young woman, but I still had strength and needed to find a reason to continue. That's when I saw a small diner in the center of town. The smell of bread fresh from the oven filled my lungs, and on impulse, I entered. Behind the counter, a kind elderly woman with white hair tied in a bun smiled at the customers. When she saw me, she blinked a few times as if trying to recognize me. "You're not from around here, are you?" My voice came out weak. "No, I just arrived." She wiped her hands on her apron and approached. "Well, everyone needs a start. Sit down, and the coffee's on me." I sat, and that was the first moment of calm I had felt in years. The coffee was hot, bitter, and strong. The bread was simple but soft, with a taste that reminded me of my childhood, and for a few minutes I allowed myself to just exist. It was there, in that small diner, that my new life began. Months passed. I got a job at the little corner diner, modest but sufficient. The routine of waking up early, preparing bread, serving coffee, brought me a kind of peace I didn't know. I still thought about Daniel sometimes. In the silence of the night, I would take the photo of him as a boy and pass my fingers over his face, wondering if he thought of me, if he had already looked at that photo I had left for him, if at some moment he felt an emptiness without knowing why. But I learned that there are things in life that cannot be forced. And after so much time, I chose to move forward. On an ordinary day, while I was sweeping in front of the diner, a woman called to me. She seemed to have traveled from far away. Dusty clothes, a hesitant look. "Are you Elizabeth?" My heart accelerated. I had never told my name to anyone there. "Yes, I am." She held something in her hands, an envelope. "They asked me to deliver this to you." I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much. My fingers trembled as I took the letter. Before I could ask anything, she turned her back and left. My heart was pounding in my chest. I held the envelope tightly and slowly tore the corner. Inside was a handwritten sheet, and at the top, just one phrase. I discovered everything. My legs gave way. I sat on the step of the sidewalk, holding that sheet as if it were the most precious thing in the world. The words danced before my eyes. "Mother, I know who you are. I know what happened to me. I know about the lie I've lived all these years." My breathing faltered. I continued reading. "I didn't know. They never told me. But when I saw your photo, something inside me awakened. The resemblance between us was unmistakable, and I started asking questions. Mrs. Harrison finally broke down and told me everything. It was as if I had always known, but never had the words to understand. I don't know what to do now. I don't know if I'm ready to see you, but I needed you to know that I know. Matthew swore Daniel. The letter fell from my lap. My eyes filled with tears. He knew. My son finally knew the truth. And maybe one day he would come to me. I closed my eyes and held the letter against my chest. I had spent my entire life waiting, but now I could wait without pain, because deep down I knew that time always finds a way to heal everything, even wounds that should never have been opened. The final reunion. Days passed after the letter, but for the first time I wasn't trapped in waiting. I kept the sheet with the name of Daniel or Matthew inside an old book that sat beside my bed. Every night before sleeping, I read those words. I know who you are. I know what happened to me. I don't know if I'm ready to see you. These phrases were marked in my mind, in my heart, but now the choice wasn't mine. I had already done my part. I had already searched, fought, waited. Now it was his turn, and I accepted that. I accepted it because after everything, I learned that love doesn't need to hurry. The diner was quiet that afternoon. I was serving some tables, cleaning the counter, when I felt a strange chill, that sensation that runs through the body even before the mind comprehends what's happening. I raised my eyes, and then I saw him. He was there, on the other side of the street. Daniel. My heart stopped. My body froze. He was different, older, taller, with more marked features. But his eyes were the same. He saw me, and for an instant, time stopped. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should run to him, call him by name, hug him. But I didn't need to do anything because he came to me. He stopped at the door of the diner, still hesitant. I could see the confusion in his gaze, the emotion, the fear, and perhaps, deep down, the same question I was also asking myself. What do we do now? My hands were trembling and my voice failed. Danielle, he swallowed hard, looked around as if trying to find the right words, and then he spoke. Can I come in? I blinked, trying to hold back tears, and then smiled. Of course, my son. He sat down. I sat across from him. Neither of us knew where to begin. He fidgeted with the napkin. I held my mug of coffee. And then he broke the silence. I took a long time. My voice came out low, but it came. You came? He smiled slightly, a smile I recognized, a smile that once belonged to a boy who played in the yard of my house. I was afraid of what I would find. I nodded. I was too. He took a deep breath. I don't know what to remember. I don't know what to feel, but something inside me always told me I didn't belong where I was. My eyes filled with tears. You always belonged to me. He looked at his own hands and then raised his eyes to me. Can I know more? My chest warmed. My voice came out almost in a whisper. You can know everything, my son. And so we began from the beginning, not as strangers, not as unknowns, but as mother and son, as it always should have been. In the days that followed, Daniel returned other times. Each day he asked more questions, wanted to know about his childhood, about who he was before being taken, wanted to know about me. And little by little, we found each other. We didn't erase the lost time. We didn't pretend the pain didn't exist. Daniel and I can't reclaim the years we lost, but we found each other in the time we still have. Every day, we weave new threads into the tapestry of our lives, not perfect, but beautiful in its own way. The wounds have slowly healed, not because time erased them, but because love mended them. I've learned that love, even when it's stolen, buried, or betrayed, always finds its way back. It may take years, even decades, but if it's real, it will find a path. And sometimes all we need to do is wait patiently for the right moment. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, thank you for patiently listening to my story today. 77 years of life, with more than half a century spent enduring the pain of losing my child. And now, as I look back on that journey, I realize that life often leads us to unexpected crossroads, where the greatest losses bring about the most precious discoveries. My story is not only about sorrow, but also about the strength of a mother's love, about unwavering faith, and about how the truth always finds a way to come to light. Throughout the many years I spent searching for my son, I learned that time can take many things from us, but it cannot take away love and hope unless we let it. I hope my story serves as a reminder. Never give up on the ones you love, no matter how difficult the circumstances may be. Always trust your intuition and don't let fear stop you from seeking the truth, because sometimes the answers we've been searching for are much closer than we think. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude To all of you who took the time to listen to my story, if it touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the Grandparents Memories channel, a place where real-life stories full of emotion and valuable lessons from past generations are preserved. Don't forget to click the like button to support this video and share it with your loved ones. Every story told is a chance for us to better understand the value of love and patience in life. I would also like to give special thanks to the founder of the Grandparents Memories channel for creating this meaningful space and for inviting me to share my life story. Thanks to you, the lessons from the past will not be forgotten. I look forward to seeing you again in the next stories on Grandparents Memories, where every memory is a journey worth cherishing. Thank you, and may you have a wonderful day.